as an outsider looking into tech, I always wondered how people learned how to do the things they do, or how do people acquire the skills that they have to work in technology, particularly more on the technical side, right? Like programming, networking, coding, uh, DevOpsy ish things. Because I did not go to school for computer science. I didn't go to school for information technology or anything like that, or information management systems. None of those degrees. My degree is in biochemistry, so it was technical, and I've always considered myself a very technical person, but it wasn't in this particular domain. And so I kind of always wondered, you know, how did people acquire those skill sets? And so I thought it might be now, as somebody who's definitely not, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, and I wouldn't say that I've arrived, but as somebody who has those skill sets, I thought it might be interesting for you to know kind of how I went about acquiring those skills. In other words, this is sort of my how I learned to code video. And so I'll just tell you kind of how it started, the resources I used, and maybe what I would recommend if you're interested in learning how to code. So I guess really my journey of learning programming, learning coding goes back to I went to school at a university called Missouri Southern State University. It is in my hometown of Joplin, Missouri, and this is where I got my biochemistry degree from. It was a great university. It's a smaller university. It's primarily focused on teaching, but that's great if you're a student because you have a lot of one-on-one time or a lot of opportunity for one-on-one time with your professors. So if you're struggling on something or if you need more extra time, all your professors have office hours and you can walk in and have some one-on-one time. You don't have to work through a TA like you do at some of these larger universities. That being said, one of the things I did while I went to school here was I had to take some electives. And so I took computer programming 1 and computer programming 2 as electives my junior or senior year of college. I honestly don't know. I think it was my junior year. But I took computer programming 1, computer programming 2, and we learned how to write code in C sharp actually. And let me see if I can find some of my I bet I can find some of my homework from back then. Um, let me see. I did a pretty good job of keeping. This may not be interesting to you, but I did a pretty good job of keeping all my old homework and projects and things from college, just because it was so much work, and you put so much time into it. Yeah, this is fall of 2014, so that would have been my senior year. I took computer programming, analytical chemistry, applied behaviorism, and organic. I was an organic chem TA. But I had so much fun. Let's see. Here's a while loop assignment. What was this? Yeah, here we go. So I had this. This must have been CS 110. I think that's computer programming 1 or something like that. But I had so much fun doing this. I didn't even have a Windows machine, and at this time you couldn't do C sharp programming on Macs. I think I had a MacBook. I don't think you could do it. So I actually had to get my father-in-law had an old PC that he didn't want anymore, and he actually gave it to me, and that's what I used. And this was really the first time doing this class was the first time I really remember being kind of bit by an interest in technology, not interest in technology, but an interest in programming and coding. I remember staying up like way, 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 way too late working on homework assignments, just because I was kind of like addicted to that little bit of dopamine when you figured a problem out. And I wish if I could go back and talk to myself back then, I wish I would have leaned into that more. I wish I would have leaned into that passion a little bit more. But I was where I was in life, where I was in school. It just didn't seem realistic or make sense to switch majors or change majors. Being a senior deep into a technical field already. So that was my first exposure with programming. That kind of is what put that bug in my brain of like, hey, I actually like doing that kind of stuff. Okay, so fast forward, that was 2014, 2015. I graduate school. I actually went and worked for 7 years in a completely unrelated field to technology or computer programming. But at some point, I think like 2019, I kind of got to this point where I realized I didn't like the work that I was doing, and I wanted to make a change at some point. And so I thought, what can that be? What's the other career that I want to do? And so that whole experience with computer programming, one in college, kind of came back, and I thought, I think I could do that. I think I could do that work. I think I would enjoy doing that for a living. And I was also seeing like people going to boot camps and getting into tech with like 3 months of training, and they were, they had like a work from home remote lifestyle. This was all before the pandemic, and I thought, man, I had just had my first couple kids, my first couple, I had just had my kids, and I was like, man, that would be really awesome if I could find a job that gave me a lot of flexibility and allowed me to work from home and be around my family a lot. And so I went on Coursera, and I think I still have the link. Let me see if I still have the link. I went on Coursera, and I found this course. It was called Duke Learn to Programming, and I'm pretty sure it was this Programming Foundations with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And I did this course, and they have you do one of the things you do, and maybe it's later on here, but one of the things you do in this course. Oh no, it was definitely this. It was definitely Programming Foundations, because I didn't do anything with Java. But one of the things you do in this course is you build like a green screen remover, which is really cool. But this was like in 2019. I completed this course, and then I just kind of stopped. I just didn't really keep pursuing it. There was a lot of stuff going on, and the pandemic happened. We had 2 little kids, and I was just focused on family and work, and I had kind of put this on the back burner, like, hey, I'll come back to this and think about making a career change or a job switch at some point. Fast forward another year or two, and I actually got an opportunity to make a career change, make a job change into the technology space, but it wasn't doing anything technical. It was as a support analyst, working on sort of a no-code piece of software. However, one of the cool things was that this no-code piece of software has a formula engine, and this formula engine's all based on JavaScript. Granted, it's not the most modern, up-to-date JavaScript, but it is JavaScript. And so I kind of got hooked on understanding this formula engine and being able to write kind of complex formulas in this piece of software. And that kind of reinvigorated my interest and desire to want to learn more about programming and coding. And so that's where I found, and so from there, that's where I found kind of, I think, who I would contribute the most with my ability to code, which is freeCodeCamp. So if you're not familiar with freeCodeCamp and you're in the kind of place of like, I want to learn how to code, this is just an unbelievable resource. So many people have benefited from this curriculum, and it is a real curriculum. I mean, it is the real deal. It's completely free. It's completely self-paced. Let me go ahead and sign in so you can see my progress here. I don't want to. Doing my best to be conscious of not to leak anything. Yeah, so you can see, like, I did a bunch of these. I did responsive web design. I also did their JavaScript algorithm data structure certification, but they recently released a new version of this. which is why I think it's not showing up as me having completed it. But I have a ton of these courses completed, right? So I have responsive web design, front end development, data visualization, relational databases, back end development, APIs. This was mostly done like Node and Express stuff, quality assurance. I did some Python with some scientific computing and data analysis. And then they just recently, this was kind of, oh, there's my legacy certification. So there you go. They update these, right, which is pretty cool. Like they're trying to stay up to date with the latest information, and so they discontinue previous certs and release new certs, so you can kind of stay up to date on the latest information. But this is really when I got serious about it, and I just went hard from like, I wonder if my activity's on here, but I just went hard from like 2022 to like 2023. Those, I just went hard on the freeCodeCamp curriculum. I built all the projects, and I'm super proud of it. Like I still have these listed on my GitHub profile. You can see all the different projects I built. I recently moved a lot of these. I had a lot of these projects hosted on Heroku because that was free, and I recently moved a bunch of them over to Render. But yeah, you can see like some of my very first websites. Like you had to build a tribute page. I built a tribute page to this doctor named Sidney Farber, who did a lot of early work on treating cancers, particularly pediatric cancers. But yeah, and so like I think all the test suites still pass. So if let's see, tribute page. Yeah, all my tests still pass. Yeah, so this was, I mean, freeCodeCamp was really the thing that got me to the point where I could look at a problem, where I could think of something I wanted to build and really build it. Now, from the C# perspective, now freeCodeCamp, when I was doing it, didn't really go deep into the C# side of things. They do, like I said, they do now have a C# foundational certification. It's a partnership with Microsoft that you can do. The C# came in from a Pluralsight course, I think. It was a Pluralsight course by a guy named Scott Allen. I think was his name. Scott Allen. Yeah, I can't remember the exact name of the course. But I'm pretty sure it was this individual who taught it. Allen C#. Yeah. So I took a couple. I think it must have been some sort of introduction or some sort of getting started with C#. That I did, and that was kind of my first foray into C# development. And then a lot of the resources for learning C# then came from YouTube. There's a bunch of great content creators that teach C# on YouTube. You've got Nick Chappas, who's really good, really great. He's got kind of, his content tends to be much more smaller, condensed, kind of punchy, learn a helpful piece of information relatively quickly, in a few minutes. There's another guy, Tim Corey. His content's kind of blurs the line between developer education and career advice, and he also has some free courses. He's got a Blazor course that I did that was, I can't remember exactly what the course was, but I know I did it with him. So yeah, Tim Corey, and then the .NET, just like the .NET ecosystem of content, .NET, they have a channel. And so that's kind of how, so YouTube was a lot of the ways that I picked up C# programming. But between freeCodeCamp, some Pluralsight, some YouTube, I was able to kind of acquire, hey, I can build stuff on the front end. I can do JavaScript, CSS, HTML, and now I can do and I can do JavaScript on the back end on the server as well. That came from freeCodeCamp. But then I was like, okay, I can also acquire I don't want to say a big boy language, but just a little bit more, I guess, grown up, I guess is the way I would describe it, but just a different language other than JavaScript, for doing back end work, and that was C Sharp. And also where I live in a town. I live near Kansas City, and Kansas City is very much a .NET town. It's obviously not the only language, but a lot of industry, a lot of companies here use .NET, and so it was a good reason to pick it up. And so between all these resources, I was able to cobble together the ability to write code. And obviously, I don't know everything. I'm not perfect, and you never, in my opinion, I think it's a lie that developers are just these ingenious people who can just spill out lines and lines of code without ever having to look things up or to ever having to reference something. I just don't think. I mean, there's probably programmers and developers out there like that, and probably the deeper you get into your career and the more you do that kind of stuff, the more you become like that. But I don't think that's what's required up front, right? To learn, there's some like core conceptual basic knowledge. You know, what's a loop, what's a variable, what's a reference, what's a value, what's stored on the heap, what's stored on the stack. Some of these basic conceptual things. But then each language kind of has its own unique paradigm and approach to doing things, and so you just have to learn them and reference them and look them up when you need it. Okay, I've talked for quite a while, kind of telling my story of how I came to be able to code, and so having told that story now, I think I'd just like to kind of give some advice that I have after having gone on this journey. And I think the first advice is, when you're first starting out, find some structured resources. Go to freeCodeCamp, follow their curriculum from start to finish. Buy a book. Do the book from start to finish. There's actually a really great JavaScript book that's online called Eloquent JavaScript. This is a great resource. It's got some projects that you do. It's got examples at each end of each chapter that you can do. This would be a great resource. But find a resource that's structured, that's going to give you a little bit of that. What's the term? Pedagogy. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit more pedagogical, right? It's going to try to build on concepts and layers things on. I think that's what you need early on. You want to have somebody there holding your hand and guiding you. Now, at the same time, as you're following that guided and structured approach, you want to make sure you don't get stuck in tutorial hell, right? You want to, at the same time, be constantly thinking about how you can take what you're learning and apply it to your own problems, right? So you want to think about, what's something I could build or what's something I could use with what I just learned that's outside of the context of the specific thing that they were using in the course or the book to teach that concept. Can I take that concept that I learned and can I apply it in some other area? The first time I did this was when I was very early on learning HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. My son, he was in kindergarten, I think, at the time, and he was doing these, what do they call them? Number bonds is what they call them. And he was using these pieces of paper, that they would send home, that basically have these drawings that looked like, what they look like? They look like, if I can draw them for you. They basically look like this. The bond, they had a number here, and then a number up top, like this. And so they were doing stuff like, 7 and 4, and then they'd have to fill in 3, right? So they were using this to practice addition and subtraction. And so I thought, man, I could build something that that generates those for him to solve, and has like varying levels of difficulty. And so that's where I came up with this this repo. It's still on my GitHub. It's very simplistic, and I bet if I look back at the code, I would be ashamed of what I wrote. But I'm honestly super proud of this thing I built, because it solved a problem that nobody else had showed me how to solve. It was something that I purely thought up of myself. It was something I understood, and I applied it with these new skills that I had. And so I could give this to my son. I could have him open this on his iPad, and he could play this game and practice his number bonds. And he could change the difficulty level, and we put in a crazy difficulty level, right? Because he thought that was really funny. And we did different modes, right? So we put in different modes so he could practice addition and subtraction. And we added like sounds for when he got things right, it'll actually play a sound. Ding ding, right? If he gets one wrong, it would play a buzzer, right? And so it's a really simple project, but it's something I'm super proud of, because it was that first time I really showed myself that, hey, I do understand what I'm learning in this structured course, because I took those concepts, I took what I learned, and I applied it to this other thing. And so that would be my recommendation to you too, is as you're going through some sort of structured curriculum or structured course, and I would also highly recommend, don't pay, try to find a free resource. I mean, I would definitely vouch for freeCodeCamp. But as you're doing that, also be thinking, what are things in my life, what are stuff that I have that I could solve with these new skills? And then as soon as you finish that structured course, that structured curriculum or book or anything, or that thing that you're following, what I would tell you then is to not go find another course. Don't find another book. If you're and again, I'm not trying to talk to you about how to get a job. I'm talking to you about how to learn to code. And so what I would say is, after you get done with those courses, don't go pick up another one, or after you get done with the book, don't pick up another book. What you should do is stay within the languages you know, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or maybe you picked up Rust. I don't know. Maybe you decided to go some crazy offbeat path. But then take that language that you know now, that you've been taught the basics of, and spend all your time building something that scratches your own itch, solves a problem for yourself. And don't be afraid to bite something off that's complex, right? That in the back of your mind, you know, I don't have all the skills that are necessary to build that, right? But I have enough to get started. Because what that's going to allow you to do is going to allow you to stay out of tutorial hell, solve a unique problem that's going to force you to kind of stretch and reach and apply yourself. But it's also going to give you the opportunity to say, oh, you know what? I don't actually know how to do a queue. I don't know how to build a queue, or I don't know how to run a background job. And then you can pause, right? You can pause your work on this project of yours, and you can go over to a course or to a book or to Google, and you can do some learning to figure out, hey, how does someone build a queue? How do you run a background job if you're using Node? Or how do you run a background job if you're using .NET? And once you've done some learning and built some POCs and small things, then you can come back to your project and again apply that same concept. And for me, that's really where the learning and the knowledge acquisition comes from, is you spend some time in a structured environment where somebody is sort of holding your hand, and then as soon as possible, you transfer that knowledge to another domain, to another unknown, where somebody isn't giving you explicit direction, where you have to take what you learn and actually apply it. Because if you spend all your time in a course or in a book, while that's great, what you'll quickly find is that the minute you leave those contexts, you suddenly realize, oh wait, do I know how to do that? I don't, like, you all of a sudden it reveals like, oh, I wasn't actually learning. I wasn't actually grabbing it. I was just doing kind of rote follow along instructions, which is which is what tutorial hell is, right? It's like, oh, I was pushing the buttons and I was clicking on the things and I was typing the commands, but I wasn't actually grasping it, which is why you should find a structured course and curriculum that's project based. But then as soon as possible, you should be trying to set up and build your own things and apply your own solutions. So that's my story of how I learned to code. And that's my advice if you find yourself also wanting to code. Again, freeCodeCamp is probably where I'd send you. Start with web development, start with the basics, and then grow from there.